Good morning, students. In the previous video, we discussed the objectives and outcomes of the course Communication Skills 1. So, in the present video, we'll discuss the chapterization of the course Communication Skills 1. There are 5 chapters in this course. The first chapter of this course is Introduction to Communication. So, in the first chapter, we'll be discussing what is communication, why communication is important, why we should become good communicators, and the importance of communication, significance of communication, nature and scope of communication, definitions of communication given by various philosophers, authors, and the kinds of communication, verbal communication and non-verbal communication. So we'll be discussing these concepts in the first chapter. So what is communication? Definition of communication, origination, also importance and significance, scope and nature, verbal and non-verbal communication and other types of communication. In the second chapter, we'll be discussing reading skills. So second chapter deals with reading skills. So reading skills, what is reading, the kinds of reading, skimming, scanning, and extensive intensive reading, types of reading, reading comprehension of seen and unseen passages, and reading poetry, reading prose, and newspaper reading, and also reading and analysis. So we'll be discussing these concepts in the second chapter. The third chapter deals with grammar. So grammar, the third chapter deals with grammar. So we'll be discussing what is grammar, and we'll be discussing parts of speech. We'll be discussing kinds of sentences. We'll be discussing subject, predicate. We'll be discussing articles and determiners. We'll be discussing active voice, passive voice, and middle voice. We'll be discussing linkers, connectors, and cohesive devices. We'll be discussing verbs, transitive, intransitive, regular, irregular, finite, infinite. We'll be discussing tenses, kinds of tenses, discussing prepositions, we'll be discussing adverbs and adjectives, types of sentences. We'll discuss degrees of comparison and simple, complex, and compound sentences. And in the fourth unit, we'll be discussing enhancing vocabulary. So how to enhance vocabulary? What are the various ways to enhance our vocabulary, to enhance our professional technical vocabulary? And how to use dictionary, usage of dictionary also. So how dictionary usage will help us to improve our professional and technical vocabulary. And we'll be discussing the importance of spelling. We'll be discussing grammar and its usage in the vocabulary. So this is in the fourth chapter, we'll be discussing all these concepts. In the fifth chapter deals with writing skills, especially. So what is writing, and how to frame paragraphs, or how to split information into various paragraphs. So splitting information into various paragraphs, and how to write an essay, and how to write extensively and intensively, paraphrase writing, precise writing, expansion of writing. We'll be describing the pictures. So how to write or how to paraphrase certain information, and how to describe the pictures, and how to give directions. So we'll be discussing the concept of giving directions also. We'll be discussing situational dialogue writings. Another important aspect, another important concept is situational dialogue writings. We'll be discussing social and professional writings, and telephone etiquette also we'll be discussing in the fifth chapter. So this is the chapterization of Communication Skills 1 course. So in the first chapter, We'll be discussing introduction to communication, definition, origination, scope, nature, and kinds of communication, verbal, non-verbal communications. And in the second chapter, we'll be discussing reading skills, what are the various kinds of reading, skimming, scanning, extensive, intensive, guessing the meanings of unfamiliar words, and reading of prose poetry, and reading of newspaper, and reading and analysis of newspapers and magazines. And third chapter deals with grammar. In this chapter we'll be discussing parts of speech, kinds of sentences, subject and object, and we'll be discussing articles, we'll be discussing connectors, linkers, we'll be determinants, we'll be discussing verbs, transitive, intransitive, definite, finite, indefinite, regular, irregular, prepositions, adjectives, adverbs. We'll be discussing degrees of comparison, simple, complex, and compound sentences. The fourth chapter deals with enhancing vocabulary and what are the various ways to enhance our professional and technical vocabulary, and how to develop or improve professional vocabulary using of dictionary, spelling, grammar, and its usage and vocabulary. And the fifth unit we'll be discussing writing skills. So what are the various ways to improve writing skills, create various types of writing skills, creative writing and precise writing, paraphrase writing, and we'll be discussing describing the pictures and giving directions, situational dialogue writing, social and professional etiquette, and telephone etiquette writing. So all these things we'll be discussing in the fifth unit. Thank you.